You want me to put that on my Tudor?
Harry's wife. Hell for Harry. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Despite the assertion in the Scottish Daily Express just recently that Harry is thriving, we all know, first of all, from the way that he appears and the way that he behaves, but also your understanding of where he is in the narcissistic dynamic, that he's far from happy. Many of you ask me, what's really going on behind closed doors, HG? And I've given you more detail about the way that he's being devalued in parts passim. People have also asked, how's it all going to play out, HG? And again, I've given you my thoughts with regard to when he's going to be disengaged, why he's going to be disengaged from, but also the various options in terms of, for instance, if he were to escape, or if the roller coaster ride were just to continue. So you can find all of that out in separate videos. But I'm also going to give you some insight into what else may well have been going on behind closed doors, and with a look at what could play out with regard to the battle for the children. Whilst I recognise that there are those of you who think that they do not exist, I think that probably the most likely situation is that they do exist, but they came from a surrogate. The evidence certainly seems to point that way. And given that the children do exist, that means that there would, upon the relationship between Harry and Harry's wife falling apart, result in a custody battle. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know the relevant jurisdictional points and how the law works in California, whether it would have any due regard to the fact that the children are linked to the monarchy and how all of that works. But I can tell you that there will be an almighty fight. Harry, having emotional empathy, does love his children, and he'll want to either have custody of them or at least have continued involvement with them. Harry's wife, as a narcissist, will use them as pawns for the purpose of manipulating him. Although she believes that she cares about them, as a narcissist, she doesn't actually. What I'm going to provide you with is an insight into what currently may well be going on and what may well happen by introducing you to circumstances in a situation between a narcissist and his victims. In this instance, the narcissist is male, but the behaviours will be fairly similar to that of Harry's wife and will give you a good indication of what Harry is having to put up with and what awaits him. By referring you to a real-life instance of a narcissist manipulating his former intimate partner primary source, his wife, and also his children, that will give you an understanding of the way that Harry's wife will be manipulating Harry, how she will behave towards him in the future with regard to the interaction through the family court that they will inevitably find themselves in. This example involves an individual called Alan Kasanoff, who is a lawyer, and his former wife, Catherine Kasanoff. It shows the interaction between the two. It demonstrates the behaviours that he has engaged in, both towards her, towards the authorities, and also towards his children. And it can be utilised as a similar way that Harry's wife would behave. Both of them are mid-range narcissists. He's somewhat more aggressive than Harry's wife might be. Remember, as a mid-range narcissist, she's largely passive-aggressive, but there will be bursts of ignited fury here and there behind closed doors, as has been experienced by the staff who were allegedly bullied at Buckingham Palace, etc. And, of course, that Harry will find himself on the receiving end of that, while she maintains a facade to the outside world of being a kind and caring person. He similarly utilises a facade, although it leans more towards one of superiority and being a good father, and making out that she is a bad mother. You will see from the various manipulations that he deploys that they will be similar ones utilised by Harry's wife as against Harry. As I talk you through this report that has been compiled on Mr. Kasanoff, it will give you particular insight as to the way that Harry is currently being treated and what may await him. So I'd encourage you to pay due regard to what this report says so that you can understand more about what Harry's hell is actually like. The report has been compiled as known as the Frank Report, and it relates to the custody dispute and all the associated manipulations that have gone on between the Kasanoffs. The Frank Report can't confirm if Catherine Youssef Kasanoff died in Switzerland recently. She was a former federal prosecutor and attorney in a 4-year divorce and custody dispute with Alan Kasanoff, an attorney with Greenberg Traurig. They had 3 daughters. Though Catherine put her career on hold to be her children's primary caregiver, family court in Westchester County, New York, removed them from her custody 3 years ago. Catherine was diagnosed with cancer for the 3rd time. She had cancer in 2008 and 2017. She wrote a Facebook post on May the 27th explaining that she travelled to Switzerland where she had an appointment at an assisted suicide facility that day. She explained, "This is a story that ends with my own assisted death in Switzerland." She wrote, "The reason the courts engaged in this horror, where they temporarily took away custody, my personal property, a home I owned and lived in, my dogs, my health, my career and my dignity for the last 4 years, was so that the nearly $4 million that Alan Kasanoff, my ex-husband, had to spend to destroy me could be handed out to the court-appointed forensics, therapists, lawyers for the children and the attorney for Alan Kasanoff." Now note, Harry's wife is similarly wealthy, probably even wealthier than Mr. Kasanoff, and therefore she may well utilise that residual benefit for the purposes of manipulating people to cause an outcome which is to the detriment of Harry. Alan and Catherine married in November 2006. They had 3 girls. In February 2016, Alan allegedly assaulted Catherine in their home, for which she was treated at a nearby hospital. There have been suggestions that Harry has been assaulted by Harry's wife as a consequence of him sporting a bruised eye and scratches. Certainly, it is not beyond comprehension that a mid-range narcissist would behave in such a way. The Kasanoffs continue to live together, although Alan declared an open marriage. Thus, operating with his sense of entitlement, he's allowed to do what he wants and see who he wants, even though they continue to have a marriage. Thus, he has his cake and he eats it. He's able to maintain control over Catherine Kasanoff, but at the same time do what he wants and effectively cheat on her by saying, "We actually have an open marriage," but he's decided on that unilaterally. Harry's wife at the moment is understood to be attending parties on her own. Who knows? She might have declared to Harry that it's an open marriage. One suspects that she probably hasn't. But the mentality would be similar. Namely, she would continue to stay with him even though he's being devalued because she doesn't have a replacement yet lined up. That's why narcissists don't get rid of people straight away when devaluation occurs. And instead, she's going around, perhaps flirting with people, maybe even sleeping with other people, as her narcissism directs her to find somebody else. In 2016, Alan, by stealth, secured Catherine's Apple ID and password and secretly synced her iPhone with his laptop. Lack of boundary recognition. Sense of entitlement. He secretly accessed Catherine's email and text messages for years, leading to his filing for divorce in 2019. So he spends roughly 2 to 3 year period examining what she has to say, probably about him, her thoughts, her feelings, what she's doing. Alan read communications from Catherine's family members, friends and others. He even got her texts and emails from her attorney, Cynthia Monaco. Thus that shows the need for his control, that he would invade her privacy to such an extent, engaging in effect a criminal act, and this coming from an attorney. Of course, he has no sense of accountability when he engages in these behaviours. In May 2019, after his daughters disclosed to their schools that Alan allegedly kicked one of them, physical violence towards child, Alan filed for divorce in family court in Westchester County, New York, assertion of control by ending the relationship. Accusing her of manipulating the girls to make up abuse that never happened, Alan brought an ex parte application to kick Catherine out of the house and grant him temporary custody of the children. I see it as likely that Harry's wife will eventually file for divorces against Harry, thus asserting control over him by causing the relationship to come to a demise in that way. Furthermore, I also see it as likely as Harry's wife engaging in accusing Harry of manipulative behaviour by way of projection. It might be the case that Harry decides that he wants to stay at the property, or he may, as he's been doing, retreat to a bolt hole. But if he tries to stay, Harry's wife is likely to behave in the same way as Alan Kasanoff and kick him out. Alan knew about parental alienation. He could handpick text and emails to make Catherine look like an alienator and exclude those that made him look like an abuser. I also see that it's highly likely that Harry's wife will have access to Harry's social media and his emails. She'll have done so on the basis of, well, we need to know what one another is doing, but of course he won't be able to access hers, but she can access his. And typical of the narcissist would then cherry-pick material to make Harry look bad and make her look good, in the same way that Alan Kasanoff has done. Attached to Alan Kasanoff's supporting papers were screenshots of text messages between Catherine and her attorney Monaco discussing legal strategy. Alan's affidavit included 11 select text messages from September 2018. Some were undated. The judge granted his ex parte application. Catherine was removed from the home. The judge granted Alan custody of the children. This is clearly something that Harry's wife would be aiming for, to ensure that Harry is excluded from the home, that he is the one that is kicked out, and that she would want custody of the children. Not because she cares, but if Harry were to take the children, that would wound her. It would suggest that she's an unfit mother, and not only would it damage her facade, but the act of Harry doing something which is contrary to what she wants also wounds her. Accordingly, I would see it as likely that Harry's wife would behave in a similar way to Alan Kasanoff by ensuring that Harry is portrayed as the abuser. For instance, going on about his drug use. Undoubtedly, she and her mother will have footage of Harry smoking drugs, perhaps looking high, who knows, stumbling into furniture, falling over, whilst the children are around. Who was it who supplied a lot of the footage to Netflix? It was Doria. Many of the photos that were taken by Doria. So she has an established presence around the property, and undoubtedly she will, as Harry's wife's lieutenant, be encouraged to record instances of where he has done something wrong. Harry's wife doesn't make anything of it in the moment. Instead, it's just recorded for the purposes of being recorded as part of the record of recording so much of what the family does. But at an appropriate point, her narcissism will recall that this material exists, and in the circumstances will then utilize that material against him in such proceedings, in the way that Alan Kasanoff has done. Undoubtedly, Harry's wife behind the scenes has engaged in the shouting and the screaming at Harry, possibly the smashed crockery, and may have well engaged in some unpleasant behaviours towards or around the children. However, all of that will be deleted by Harry's wife's narcissism because she believes herself to be the perfect parent. In October 2019, the court appointed Carol Most as attorney to the children in the Kasanoff case, and her associate, Dr. Mark Abrams, as the custody evaluator. Abrams conducted a neutral forensic evaluation. Catherine told Abrams about Alan's abuse. The children pleaded with Abrams to let them live with their mother. They said their father was abusive. Alan provided select text messages of Catherine to Abrams, again portraying her as the problem. Abrams issued his custody evaluation report, recommending to Judge Louis Lebel that Catherine, as a parental alienator, should not see the children. You may well be shaking your head at this point to think, how on earth could they do that, given what the ex-wife is saying, given what the children are saying? And in due course, in separate videos, I'll be showing you some of the video material that shows the way that Alan Kasanoff has behaved towards his wife and children, underpinning the fact that he is a narcissist. But here, there are certain individuals who think that they know better, and that they are persuaded by the narcissist that the victim, the non-narcissist, is the one that's engaging in parental alienation. I've explained more about that in my series about parental alienation, which if you have not watched, I would encourage you to do so. I see it as extremely likely that Harry's wife, like Alan Kasanoff, will portray Harry as one who is attempting to alienate the children from Harry's wife, and she will therefore use that against him. On the 27th of March 2020, in the Kasanoff case, Judge Lebel issued an ex parte order excluding Catherine from her home and granting Alan temporary sole custody of the children. When police came to her house to remove her, Catherine had to leave without her belongings. During the COVID pandemic, Catherine was childless and homeless overnight. For a time, Catherine lived out of her car. Alan Kasanoff won't care about that. He's a narcissist with no emotional empathy. Indeed, he will deem it as something that he had to do to protect his children, being sanctimonious and holier than thou, and that Catherine Kasanoff has brought it upon herself. Similarly, Harry's wife will want to remain in the marital property. She will want to have the children, and she will want to kick Harry out, portraying him as abusive. She will make reference to his temper, and there'll be instances where, as a response to the abuse that he has received, he will have raised his voice, where he will have shouted, where he will have stormed out of a room. And it may well be the case that this has ended up being recorded and will be used against him to demonstrate that he is this hot-headed, drug-taking, absent father who would disappear off to San Vicente bungalows. Little does he realise that when he is seeking solace and sanctuary from Harry's wife, he's actually creating evidence that she's likely to use against him, just in the same way that Alan Kasanoff has done so against his wife, Catherine. I'm now going to continue with this analysis of both what Mr. Kasanoff has done and how this will quite possibly play out in a similar fashion between Harry and Harry's wife in part 2. Join me there.